as is to be expected from one who was a painter. He is often extremely technical in his art criticisms. Of Tintoret's St. George delivering the Egyptian princess from the dragon, he remarks, "The robe of Sabra, warmly glazed with Prussian blue, was relieved from the pale greenish background by a vermilion scarf, and the full hues of both are beautifully echoed, as it were, in a lower key by the purple lake-colored stuffs and bluish iron armor of the saint, besides an ample balance to the vivid azure drapery on the foreground in the indigo shades of the wild wood surrounding the castle." And elsewhere, he talks learnedly of a delicate chiavone, various as a tulip bed with rich broken tints, of a glowing portrait, remarkable for morbidezza or softness, but a scarce moroni, and of a picture being pulpy in the carnations. But as a rule he deals with his impressions of the work as an artistic whole, and tries to translate those impressions into words, to give, as it were, the literary equivalent for the imaginative and mental effect. He was one of the first to develop what has been called the art literature of the 19th century, that form of literature which is found in Mr. Ruskin and Mr. Browning, its two most perfect exponents. His description of Lancret's repas italien, in which a dark-haired girl, amorous of mischief, lies on the daisy-powdered grass, is in some respects very charming. Here is his account of the Crucifixion by Rembrandt. It is extremely characteristic of his style. "Darkness, would he pretentious darkness, shrouds the whole scene, only above the accursed wood, as if through a horrid rift in the murky ceiling, a rainy deluge, sleety floor, discoloured water, streams down amain, spreading a grisly spectral light, even more horrible than the palpable night. Already the earth pants thick and fast, the darkened frost trembles, the winds have dropped, the air is stagnant, a muttering rumble growls underneath our feet, and some of that miserable crowd begins to fly down the hill. The horses snuff the coming terror, and become unmanageable through fear. The moment rapidly approaches when nearly torn asunder by his own weight, fainting with the loss of blood, which now runs in narrow rivulets from his slit veins, his temples and breast drowned in sweat, and his black tongue parched with the fiery death fever. Jesus cries, I thirst. The deadly vinegar is elevated to him. His head sinks, and the sacred corpse swings senseless of the cross. A sheet of vermilion flame shoots sheer through the air and vanishes. The rocks of Carmel and Lebanon cleave asunder. The sea rolls on high from the sands as black weltering waves. Earth yawns, and the graves give up their dwellers. The dead and the living are mingled together in unnatural conjunction, and hurry through the holy city. New prodigies await them there. The veil of the temple, the unpierceable veil, is rent asunder from top to bottom, and that dreaded recess containing the European mysteries, the fatal ark with the tables and seven branches candelabrum, is disclosed by the light of the unearthly flames of the God-deserted multitude. Rembrandt never painted this sketch, and he was quite right. It would have lost nearly all its charms in losing that perplexing veil of indistinctness which affords such ample range wherein the doubting imagination may speculate. At present it is like a thing in another world. A dark gulf is betwixt us. It is not tangible by the body. We can only approach it in the spirit. In this passage, written, the author tells us, in awe and reverence, there is much that is terrible, and very much that is quite horrible, but it is not without a certain crude form of power, or at any rate a certain crude violence of words, a quality which this age should highly appreciate, as it is its chief defect. It is pleasanter, however, to pass this description of Julio Romanus, Cephalus, and Procris. We should read Moschus's Lament for Beyond the Sweet Shepherd before looking at this picture, or study the picture as a preparation for the lament. We have nearly the same images in both, for I, the victim, the high groves and forest stirs murmur, the flowers exhale sad perfume from their buds. The nightingale mourns on the craggy lands, and the swallow in the long-winding vales of satyrs too, and fawns dark veiled groan, and the fountain nymphs within the wood melt into tearful waters. The sheep and goats leave their pasture, and oreads, who love to scale the most inaccessible tops of uprightest rocks, hurry down from the song of their wind-courting pines, where the dryads bend from the branches of the meeting trees, and the rivers moan for white Procris with many sobbing streams, filling the far-seen ocean with a voice. The golden bees are silent on Athyme, Hymettus, and the kneeling horn of Aurora's love no more shall scatter away the cold twilight on the top of Hymettus. The foreground of our subject is a grassy sunburnt bank, broken into swells and hollows like waves, a sort of land breakers, rendered more uneven by many foot-tripping roots and stumps of trees stopped untimely by the axe, which are again throwing out light green shoots. This bank rises rather suddenly on the right to a clustering grove penetrable to no star, at the entrance of which sits the stunned Thessalian king, holding between his knees that ivory-bright body, which was but an instant agony, parting the rough boughs with her smooth forehead, and treading alike on thorns and flowers with jealously stung foot, now helpless, heavy, void of all motion, save when the breeze lifts her thick hair in mockery. From between the closely neighbored boles, astonished nymphs press forward with loud cries, and deer-skin-vested satyrs, crowned with ivy twists, advance, and put strange pity in their horned countenance. Laelaps lies beneath, and shows by his panting the rapid pace of death on the other side of the group. Virtuous love, with vans dejected, holds forth the error to an approaching troop of sylvan people, fawns, rams, goats, satyrs, and satyr mothers, pressing their children tighter with their fearful hands, who hurry along from the left in a sunken path between the foreground and a rocky wall, on whose lowest ridge a brook guardian pours from her urn her grief-telling waters. Above and more remote than the Ephedryad, another female, rending her locks, appears among the vine-festooned pillars of an unshorn grove. The center of the picture is filled by shady meadows, sinking down to a river mouth. Beyond is the vast strength of the ocean stream, from whose floor the extinguisher of stars, rosy Aurora, drives furiously up her brine-washed steeds to behold the death pangs of her rival. Were this description carefully rewritten, it would be quite admirable. The conception of making a prose poem out of paint is excellent. Much of the best modern literature springs from the same aim. In a very ugly and sensible age, the arts borrow not from life, but from each other. His sympathies, too, were wonderfully varied. In everything connected with the stage, for instance, he was always extremely interested, and strongly upheld the necessity for archaeological accuracy in costume and scene painting. In art, he says in one of his essays, whatever is worth doing at all is worth doing well. And he points out that once we allow the intrusion of anachronisms, it becomes difficult to say where the line is to be drawn. In literature again, like Lord Beaconsfield on a famous occasion, he was on the side of the angels. He was one of the first to admire Keats and Shelley, the tremulously sensitive and poetical Shelley, as he calls him. His admiration for Wordsworth was sincere and profound. He thoroughly appreciated William Blake. One of the best copies of the Songs of Innocence and Experience that is now in existence was wrought specially for him. He loved Alain Chartier and Ronsard and the Elizabethan dramatists, and Chaucer and Chapman and Petrarch, and to him all the arts were one. Our critics, he remarks with much wisdom, seem hardly aware of the identity of the primal seeds of poetry and painting, nor that any true advancement in the serious study of one art co-generates a proportionate perfection in the other. And he says elsewhere that if a man who does not admire Michelangelo talks of his love for Milton, he is deceiving either himself or his listeners. To his fellow contributors in the London Magazine, he was always most generous, and praises Barry Cornwall, Alan Cunningham, Hazlitt, Elton, and Leigh Hunt, without anything of the malice of a friend. Some of his sketches of Charles Lamb are admirable in their way, and with the art of the true comedian, borrow their style from their subject.